properly noticed to having the agendas placed on the board's by placing the agenda on the board's website on Monday, July 8th, 2013. The formal hearing that we had scheduled for this morning has been settled with an agreed order pending approval by the board. Bill Office and Casey Stewart have been reappointed to the board by Governor Haslam. Bill will serve a 3-year term as one of the CPA representatives from Middle Tennessee, and Casey will serve a 3-year term as one of the CPA representatives of East Tennessee. We need to recognize Christy Burton. She is one of the newest member of our staff. She will be the complaint coordinator, taking the job over from Karen Condon. So welcome. Do you want to get up and say hi? Have you met everybody? Okay. All right. It says here we need to adopt Robert's Rules of Order.
That's an annual thing, Mr. Chairman, and it is normally done at the July meeting, so if you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Get that in the record.
We'd make a formal motion, I guess.
So moved. Second.
Okay. A first, a second. All those in favor, or any discussion? Take it there's none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 You should have the meetings from the May 3rd meeting if you want to review those. And when you're done, I'll accept a motion on accepting those.
Previously mailed to us, sir. I'd make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay. I'll second. I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Minutes are approved. Just to let y'all know, I think Bill's on the phone, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Bill. All right. So we're down to the executive director's report, Mark.
The executive director's report was previously mailed to you. I'll entertain any questions. I do have one or two things to include with that they're not on there. Proposed changes to the UAA have been released by NASBA and the AICPA. They were released yesterday or the day. Well, actually, I think it was on Wednesday. The exposure draft contains revisions which are designed to incorporate a change in the definition of a test. Comments on that are due by October 17th, 2013, which is before our next meeting. I believe Mr. Brewer is going to address this a little bit in his report from the UAA committee. But what I'd like to do is send those comments to you, let you look at the exposure draft, and then perhaps we can draft a letter of comments to go to them before the next meeting. On webcast update, I did want to let you know that I talked to Paul Hartbarger again this morning. Paul is our director of IT. We are setting up a meeting with the people who can actually make this happen in the next couple of weeks. We're shooting for an October launch date.
This will be the ethics, state-specific ethics online.
Yes, the state-specific ethics, 2 hours. We've got to do a webinar type thing where they can call in. We've got to be able to register. They're logged in. They're logged in the entire time.
Okay.
That type of thing.
And are we going to, what will be the fee structure? Will we have a fee on that, or will it just be free of charge?
I was thinking free of charge.
Yeah, I think that's probably. Does anybody have any commentary on that?
I was just going to ask the question. Did I understand you to say that you were hoping to get it started by October?
Yes, because we got a lot of requests there in November, December for last-minute ethics. So we're hoping that we can launch it in October and cut that off and be able to do it here without traveling.
So this will put a damper on most people offering state-specific ethics. I mean, this is going to be so easy, I think, to do that as we continue to approve these seminars and things for state-specific ethics. I don't know now if it's free, why anybody would want to pay for it, but so I think that'll have a significant impact. I don't know what any issues or anything like that anybody has any commentary on, but I do think this is a positive thing for the profession.
Take a little time for the profession to get accustomed to it, but it certainly be a very positive thing.
How are we going to promote it?
What do you suggest in the way of promotion? Email? I guess the society or somebody we might be able to. Would y'all be willing to put something out?
put it on the website. We'll notify people when they call in. We get a lot of call-in requests for ethics. We get a lot of calls. I've got to have it. Where can I go to get it?
Right.
That type of thing. So we can promote it that way.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mark? Mark, are you finished with your report?
I'm finished unless there are questions.
Okay. Questions for Mark? No. All right. I guess we'll move into the rulemaking hearing.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, because the meeting notice sets the rulemaking hearing for 9 o'clock, and that's what it's posted for, I think we're going to have to wait till 9 o'clock to get started on it.
Okay. We'll move on. Does the formal hearing piece, can we start that, or do we need to wait as well on that? I mean, we're not doing the formal hearing, I understand, but do y'all have to present something to us to?
Mr. Chairman, that will be part of the legal report.
Okay.
And since everything that's left on here is listed under the 9 o'clock heading, I think that's what we'll be working with today.
Okay. Brad, do y'all want to go ahead and do your presentation?
Chairman, board members, I want to thank you for letting us come here today. David Morgan and I are here on behalf of the Tennessee Society of CPAs to ask that the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy to make some type of affirmative statement in recognition or support of the new financial reporting framework for small and medium-sized entities. It was recently issued by the AICPA and has received a good bit of publicity in the accounting press. FRF for SMEs is an OCBOA, and it's presented as an alternative for small private companies that don't require financial statements in accordance with GAAP. You've probably read some of the press that has been generated by NASBA and over the last 6 months in opposition of the framework. I understand that NASBA has recently come out and indicated that they are now supportive of the framework. They're working with the AICPA to make some modifications apparently that satisfies them. But we believe that as a result of the publicity that's been out there, there's a great deal of confusion in the licensee community and the public that we want to try to clarify that TSCPA has been developing programs and articles, and we're doing online presentations and trying to educate licensees in Tennessee as to this is a suitable alternative for small businesses. And there's been a great deal of discussion as to whether NASBA, as they said they would present a proposed rule to the Board of Accountancy that would prohibit the use of the framework, which we think would be damaging not just to the profession, but to business in Tennessee and the public's interest, quite frankly. Those companies that don't require GAAP are put at a distinct disadvantage when forced to not utilize this alternative if it's available to other licensees in other states. But regardless of what NASBA's position is now or in the future, we feel strongly that it's important for the State Board to let our licensees know that it currently has no interest in adopting any rule that would prohibit the use of the framework. And the TSCPA's Board of Directors has unanimously adopted a resolution in support of the new framework, and we're asking for the State Board to do likewise. As I said, we feel like it's very important to the profession and the public's interest. And David Morgan is with me today. He actually was chairman of the task force, AICPA task force that developed the framework, and I asked him to come and just present a brief overview of where we've been and its purpose and the rationale behind our request. So if I could ask David to come up.
Good morning. I'm David Morgan. I'm a practicing CPA here in Nashville, and have been for almost 39 years. I've been active in the American Institute of CPAs over the years, including serving 3 years as chair of the private company practice section. During that time, our group focused a lot on private company accounting standards. The general belief was that accounting standards at the time were being set primarily for public companies, and that the small companies and private companies' voice was not being heard. There was a lot of activity went on. There was a private company financial reporting committee established at the FASB. Unfortunately, for 2 years, none of the FASB members consented to even meeting with the people who ran the private company financial reporting committee, and as you can imagine, very little input was heard. In 2010, the Blue Ribbon Panel was formed. I happened to serve on the Blue Ribbon Panel. We met for a year. We exposed a report at the end of that year and said there needs to be significant modifications to private company accounting standards, and that, in fact, the recommendation of the committee was that the FAF, which oversees the FASB, establish a separate board, separate from the FASB, to set accounting standards for privately held companies. Unfortunately, that report was not received well by FAF, and they decided to go a different route. They appointed the Private Company Council, I believe is the right acronym, PCC, which was now 3 years into its, from the time we started the Blue Ribbon Panel. They have actually not yet accomplished anything, but they have, in fact, put 3 or 4 exposures out to make some modifications, which will be helpful to people who need to use GAAP. In the meantime, it become more and more aware as public company financial statements are moving to fair value. The FASB approach to financial statements is that it doesn't matter what's in the footnotes, it needs to be on the balance sheet and the income statement, and disclosures are not adequate. So such things as leases all being recorded on the balance sheet, a dramatic change in revenue recognition is going to make it harder and harder for private companies, small private companies, to comply with GAAP. And a lot of them may choose to, and have chosen in the past. We've had OCBOA financial statements for 40 years. So this is not anything new. We just didn't have we didn't have a framework. In fact, the financial reporting framework is a relatively new term, and it really replaces OCBOA. Well, I don't think OCBOA is really in the standards anymore, but everybody understands what that means. So where before we had cash basis financial statements, we had tax basis financial statements, modified cash, whatever that meant. We have a lot of different ones that weren't GAAP. We didn't really have a framework for a set of financial statements that wanted to present a robust, general purpose financials, but not in accordance with GAAP. So this task force was appointed. Some very bright people, not including me, but some really good technicians on the committee that understood the issues. Our goal was to put a workable framework out that explained how you account for various issues under the framework, and to make things simpler, easier, and more relevant financial statements, with the hope that the users of the financial statements, which also share the concerns that many of us share about the complexities of GAAP, would find this as an alternative solution for their smaller clients, and be willing to accept financial statements prepared in accordance with FRF for SMEs, which is a 200-page plus document. It provides guidance on how you account for all the important issues. It is not a rules-based document. It's a principles-based document, so it requires the use of some professional judgment, but certainly it does put standards in place that will require people who prepare financial statements in accordance with this framework, either under audits, compilations, or reviews, to follow the framework. And if you don't follow the framework, you'd be doing the same thing as if you didn't follow GAAP in preparing financial statements. So we think it's a very good document. It's been exposed and comments received. The committee met back before final exposure list, reviewed all the input that we received. Interestingly enough, most of the input we got were from the larger firms who said they're not going to use it anyway, but they sent us long letters telling us things that we should change, and we did change quite a few things. And then it has been exposed now for a month or so. So I believe it's a very good document. I believe it'll be, the test now is, will it be accepted in the marketplace? And I'm willing for that to be a market-based decision. And if our clients want to use it, and their lenders deem it appropriate, I believe it'll be a good thing. So I would urge you to support, provide the support that Brad has described before, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
David, could you remind me who was on that blue ribbon panel, or who appointed the members to that? Was FAF involved, or?
Blue ribbon panel was formed by three entities: NASBA, FAF, and the AICPA. The leaders of all three entities being Terry Pooley, who's the president of FAF, Barry Melanson, the president of the AICPA, and Billy Atkinson, who was at the time the chairman of NASBA. Interestingly enough, Billy now is the head of the PCC committee. So there were the three of them. There were 18 people in total, only 3 practicing CPAs. There were a number of investment-related folks. There were several bankers, and there was an academic on the committee. At the end of the day, the committee, and I can't tell you the exact vote, but we agreed to use the word supermajority. I think it was 16 out of 18 votes approved the recommendation of the Blue Ribbon panel.
All the interested players right now in this debate had an opportunity to participate in that blue ribbon panel.
Oh, yeah, they did.
NASBA and FAF.
And I will say this about FASB, because I've had an opportunity to do a little speaking and interact with some of the folks at the FASB, and they have clearly taken it upon themselves to be more attuned to private companies. They admit readily that they did not pay any attention to private companies prior to the Blue Ribbon panel, but it clearly got their attention, and they say that they're going to pay much more attention to private company issues. The real issue, as I see it, though, is public companies are interested in fair value. You know, they're more and more moving towards fair value for their financial statements, which, don't get me wrong, I think is appropriate for public companies. If I'm a user of a public company financial statement, I'm trying to determine what the fair value of my share of stock or my debt instrument, whatever that registered instrument is, and fair value helps me. But most private companies are fine with historical cost. And as we know as accountants, it's much more difficult to constantly determine fair value of assets and liabilities, and oftentimes, frankly, not very meaningful or relevant, is the word we use in the Blue Ribbon panel, not very relevant to our smaller private companies. So this FRF for SMEs is an attempt to reach out to that group and provide them an alternative that they can choose. It is a non-authoritative. That means it's not been adopted by any board with authority. There's not an ongoing board to set and review this thing. Once our task force is done, we're done. And the idea is that if the framework will stay in place for several years as is, we'll see what happens in practice. If there's some need, for example, if the NASBA comes up with, and the AICPA comes up with some adjustments they'd like to see made, the task force could either get back together or a new task force will be appointed and it can be modified. But there's not a board like the FASB whose job it is to think every day about how we can change this and make it more complex and difficult for people to use. That's the goal, is for it to be stable, but it can't be very nimble in the sense that it can be changed as needed.
Dude, I've been over at the TSCPA convention. I mean, it's been going on concurrent with meetings yesterday. Bill Bailoff, I believe, is the current chair.
Bailoff, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of the AICPA. This was a topic in his presentation. He made a comment that there's been, I guess, since this thing has been exposed, there's been some feedback from bankers as maybe some of the important users of this framework. Can you share any more insight?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what Bill was referring to, but I will tell you this. The Tennessee Society of CPAs Nashville chapter sponsored a bankers night. I believe Mark was there at our meeting, and I actually made a presentation along with some other people on other subjects, but I made a presentation about FRF for SMEs, and there were a number of bankers in the room, several of whom I knew, and afterwards I talked to them, and I think he got a very favorable response. You know, bankers want good financial statements. They want reliable financial statements, and they like the highest level of assurance that they can get their clients to provide. You know, when the cost of complexities drive up the cost of a audit under GAAP, then sometimes they have to step down from an audit to a review or a compilation. Whereas if the cost of preparation is not quite so high, maybe the bankers can get a higher level of assurance on the financial statements, which I think would be a good thing for them and a good thing for the profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Brad,
I did have one.
sorry.
I did have one question, and like I say, this is really not in my area of. A lot of it may not be in my area of work, but you said this was more of a framework of. So, when I hear that, I'm of course I think framework outside box. This is not necessarily adding other ways to produce a financial statement. I mean, a lot of different ways. I mean, I know that it gives you a
It is, in
format.
fact, a different way to produce financial statements. It is not GAAP, which is one way to produce a financial statement. You can produce a financial statement today on the cash basis or on the basis that you use for your tax return.
Right.
This is an additional basis, and it has a lot more meat on the bone than, I say, cash basis. You can do cash basis financial statements, but there's really no rules out there that tells you what is cash basis. I mean, intuitively, you can figure that out. Tax basis, you're following whatever the tax rules are. So if you want to do some, and you see a lot of this modified cash or modified tax perhaps, there's not a lot of flesh on the bone there on how you do this. This is a 200-page document that tells you how you do that. How you account for certain things that are different from what GAAP. I'll give you one example. There's some optionality in this statement that allows you to choose some different methods of accounting. Now, you disclose in the footnotes which you're using and all. But, for example, a lot of small companies and a lot of us CPAs who work with small companies have had many discussions with our clients about deferred taxes. They have a hard time understanding deferred taxes. Some of us have a hard time understanding deferred taxes. This framework allows you to use the taxes payable method. Just record what taxes you owe on your financial your tax return as your tax expense, and go on. You disclose in your footnotes what kind of time differences there may be, but you don't have to compute and disclose and record deferred taxes. So it's just simpler, and for people who really are not that interested in the deferred tax, the esoterics of deferred tax accounting, it's a much more relevant disclosure.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate at this point to make a motion to adopt this resolution?
Brad, did you want to just kind of go through this real quick?
As I said, TSCPA Board of Directors adopted a much lengthier resolution in support of the framework. Our concern is right now, as we promote the framework to licensees, to bankers, to users of financial statements, as well as private companies, there's this lingering release and publication of NASBA's position over the past 8 months that says they're going to present guidelines for boards of accountancy to encourage licensees not to use the framework. They're going to present guidelines to encourage users not to accept the framework. They're going to present rules that would prohibit the use of the framework and, in essence, make it illegal. My desire is for this board to make an affirmative statement of some type that would either support or, if not support, this particular draft resolution that I offered up to the board simply states that it would be recognized as an appropriate alternative to GAAP. Currently, you recognize as an appropriate alternative to GAAP cash basis, modified cash, taxed, or other OCBO, I think, regulatory statements are there. These the board regulates the performance of the test function in the state of Tennessee. Audits, reviews, and compilations performed on statements that are developed in accordance with this framework are subject to peer review. There's oversight, there's regulations. Management accountants that select this framework, they're subject to the Code of Professional Conduct. There are regulatory elements in place to give this board the same regulatory authority you have on anything else that a licensee might do that is outside the boundaries of what's public protection. This is simply a solid framework that's embraced strongly by the profession the bankers that we've talked with, and I sat with some the night that we heard David and others speak on the framework at that Nashville chapter meeting out at the Cool Springs Marriott. We had about 250 people in attendance, and the comments have all been favorable. It's a welcome relief. We've been struggling with the standards overload relative to private companies for 40 years. Blue Ribbon Panel finally moved the needle. We are very much, by the way, in favor of the Private Company Council working with FASB to develop some exceptions to GAAP for small private companies. That's very, very favorable, and we're supporting 100%, providing the resources that we can to communicate what's going on there. But at the same time, this framework is something that's strong and is something that we feel like if the board will at least recognize and deem it appropriate, as you do other OCBOA statements, it will give us at least a platform on which to communicate to those users and public and licensees, that group of interested parties that I mentioned earlier, that there's very little likelihood that a regulatory body, the State Board of Accountancy, is going to step in with a rule prohibiting the use of it. That's our biggest fear. As I mentioned recently, as in, I think, Monday, NASBA has come out with additional news releases. This seems to be picked up by the national press on a regular basis, and if you read much of it, you've read a lot of it, and they've aired opposition on things like the exposure period wasn't long enough. Well, the exposure period was fairly lengthy. Disclosure in there. Well, disclosure is clear. It's there, and it's in black and white. Said we'll a little confuse the public that it may be GAAP. Well, you read the disclosures, and just like you would any other OCBOA statements, and the disclosures there. It's all of the opposition statements that they've come up with have been addressed. I see it as a misguided attempt to maybe give some more credibility to the private company councils working with FASB on this, and as I said, profession's very much supportive of that. This draft resolution I see as a simple resolution. It simply states what the framework is, what the Board of Accountancy is authorized to do, and in essence you're recognizing it as appropriate. And for us to be able to communicate and we've got two big articles in the Journal that just came out this week. There have been articles, and we've got online courses. We're going to be doing other seminars for licensees around the state, and it would just reduce somewhat of the confusion that's been generated by NASBA's, I characterize it as a misguided effort to derail what is very favorable for the profession and the public. It's clearly a public interest issue, but in my opinion, it will hurt the small businesses in Tennessee if they can't utilize this framework. So I would suggest that if that resolution is satisfactory, I would encourage you to adopt it. If not, some form of support or affirmative statement that there isn't a current desire or appetite to set up regulatory roadblocks that might discourage the use of this, and that's why we presented it.
Thank you, Brad. Mm-hmm. Mark, do you see any issues? I mean, we're about to consider another form of accounting here, so I want to make sure everybody's...
Well, I appreciate Mr. Floyd bringing this to the board. However, before you take any action, I would encourage you to wait and get an opinion from NASBA. Let them address the board before you take any action. They are opposed to the FRF for SMEs for various reasons, and I prefer to let them expostulate on those.
I thought they issued a joint letter on Monday that indicated they were not opposed any longer.
Their joint letter indicated that they are working with the AICPA to create something that would be favorable to both parties.
That's not what the AICPA told us at the convention.
What their release says. They're supportive of it now. They've come out with a joint statement in support, but it's something that rules could be, in our opinion, brought back up. The Board of Accountancy meets quarterly. This is something that we put a lot of resources in and continue to. For us to delay action on some indication to the licensees, I think will put us further behind, but that's an opinion.
I would think that the AICPA is our go-to guy on standard setting and not NASBA, and I don't have a problem with NASBA. I believe that I look to the AICPA structures for my standards that I'm trying to hold people accountable for, and not NASBA trying to tell me that they don't know what they're talking about. So, and maybe I'm being a little strong in my verbiage here, but since Brad originally sent us the thing, I wouldn't even commit to Brad until I'd done some more research. I'm particularly after hearing 2 or 3 speakers with knowledge at the convention mention it. So
I frankly don't understand how NASBA, it's an issue for NASBA to give consideration to. I think it's a little bit outside the scope of the purpose of NASBA.
I tell you, I'm on board with this too. I think this kind of framework is long overdue. I mean, you talk about 40 years. I've been in the business 43 years, and this has been an issue ever from day one when I entered the profession. So and there's been very little done, almost nothing. And I don't think this thing in any way gets in the way of the progress of the Financial Accounting Foundation or the FASB or the Private Company Council. If anything, it would seem to me it might give them an incentive to hurry up. Let's do something significant and maybe help that effort. But I'm totally on board with this, and wouldn't I had to vote this morning if we can do that. So
I just don't want to put us in a bad position with anybody, but I mean, it sounds like the board is leaning towards a certain direction. So
As indeed.
So this means, I guess, effectively starting tomorrow, or that would be Saturday, but starting tomorrow, this would be a new acceptable form of financial statements that could be presented.
It currently is now,
Right.
today, and the potential for the Board of Accountancy to adopt the rules that NASBA had initially indicated they were coming out with, it's created some confusion, and I think an affirmative statement recognizing the framework would give us a platform to alleviate the concern of the licensees who are working to understand, embrace, and learn and implement it. I think that it would be helpful for.
How are we going to sell this? I mean, not we, but as a profession. I mean, I know bankers. You've talked with bankers. You've done things, but at what point and how does it become an acceptable form of financial? I mean, that's my bigger question: is how do I tell my
clients? That's a very good question, and in fact, I've had a couple articles answered, published, and answering that question is really the $64,000 question.
Right.
Will it be successful? I can't tell you because that's a future issue. But it will require the efforts of individual CPAs to go visit with their bankers and say, here is an alternative that you might want to consider for your client, who is also our client, and we think this would be a better way to present their financial statements. And, I believe we're going to need some grassroots campaign to educate bankers one-on-one. We're going to need to do more things like the Tennessee Society did and inviting bankers to meetings. And in fact, I'm scheduled to speak to the Bankers Association's meeting in the fall, where they're having their credit officers in and doing some other training and talk to them about FRF for SME so that they understand it. So I believe the way it becomes accepted in the marketplace is that the CPA profession is going to have to do a good job of educating the bankers that this is a viable alternative to GAAP and may well be more relevant for their small private company financial statement preparers.
I guess the issue I get down to is I'm dealing with a banker who's not the credit officer. It's the credit officer that's actually looking at these things and doing the things. And so now with the advent of super regional banks, it's almost like you got to go down to Atlanta or go wherever the bank is headquartered in Birmingham or sell the actual whole bank on this being accepted.
Well, there's a lot of already there's a lot of non-compliance in the marketplace. There's a lot of bank agreements out there that say that clients will present their financial statements in accordance with GAAP, and they're not. They're cash basis, tax basis, other methods of presentation. So I think it does require some changes. Will it be easy? No. Banks move slowly in changing their documents, and sometimes, frankly, they don't always understand the difference between GAAP and another acceptable framework of accounting. What they understand is they want financial statements that are prepared in accordance with some rules that puts a fence around the financials that says this is what goes in, and if it doesn't fit in here, it's not in compliance with the rules. And this is what that framework does. It provides a fence around a financial reporting framework to make it understandable for both the users and the preparers of what goes in there.
David, isn't this really kind of a framework that sort of comes in over the top of what we've already been doing with OCBOA statements?
I think so. I mean, I think, as I said earlier, there's been a lot of OCBOA financial statements prepared over the years, and there really was no authoritative literature out there about how you accounted for different things. Now, there were some non-authoritative things that a lot of us use, PPC and some other publications that could help you. This is just one that's in the hierarchy is maybe just a little more authoritative, but not authoritative in the sense it's adopted by a body. And just so we all understand this, nobody's required to use this. It's a choice. You don't have to use it. If it works for you, you use it. If you don't, it doesn't work for you, you don't use it. But Henry, and I might get myself in trouble saying this, but I'm going to say this. I agree with you about NASBA. NASBA, in my understanding of the NASBA's role, is they're a regulator or an association of regulators whose job is to make sure that people are following the rules. This is a standard setting issue, or it's not standard. It's hard when you say standard. It's a framework. It's a issue similar to a standard setting issue, and unless somebody's doing something that's inappropriate, I don't really understand why NASBA got involved in the first place.
All right, if there's no more questions, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion if there is one.
So moved.
Second.
Can't get it out. So move.
All right, I have a motion. I have a second. Is there any discussion?
This is to pass the resolution.
Say again, Bill.
This is, I read that the motion is to pass the resolution in support of not supporting NASBA's position.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case now, but we are definitely voting at this point to pass the resolution as presented by the Tennessee Society.
Would it be appropriate for someone to read this into the minutes? Or
all right, I'll take care of that. Resolution. The Tennessee State Board of Accountancy does hereby adopt the following resolution. Whereas the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has issued the Financial Reporting Framework for Small and Medium-Sized Entities, FRF for SMEs, as another comprehensive basis of accounting, OCBOA, alternative for entities that do not require financial statements prepared using generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. Whereas the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy is authorized to regulate all attest services provided by certified public accountants in Tennessee as defined in the Tennessee Accountancy Law, TCA 62-1-101, and now therefore be it resolved that Tennessee State Board of Accountancy formally recognize FRF for SMEs as an OCBOA that is appropriate to be used as an alternative to GAAP when GAAP-based financial statements are not required, and the owners of private companies and their users of their financial statements deem FRF for SMEs to be appropriate. In witness whereof, the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy has adopted the above resolution by, it says unanimous, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but vote of its members this 19th day of July 2013. Okay, so if there's no second, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. I mean, if there's no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I hear any nays. Hearing none, the motion or the resolution passes.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to personally thank David Morgan for being here this morning and all the effort and time I'm sure he's put into this. I bet your per hour rate's pretty high, isn't it, David? So thank you for being here, and Brad Floyd also.
Thank y'all. All right, with that, we are at our appointed time for the rulemaking hearing and the formal hearing. Mr. Whitaker, if you want to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's all right with Mr. Joseph, we can go ahead and take up the formal hearing first. Mr. Joseph has a brief presentation to present an agreed order for the board's consideration, and with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Most of the underwriters have got a checklist, is it there? And don't understand. Badly enough.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Condon's going to go get Mr. Joseph, but in the interest of moving us along, I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation, and if I complete it before he gets back, great, and if not, then he can finish up or answer any questions. It is on your iPad under the document Supplemental Legal Report. This is for complaint number L12-ACC-RBS 2011-032501. Administrative Procedures Division, docket number 12.19-120253J. This is a matter of Tracy Wright. The allegation is that Ms. Wright held out to the public as a CPA without a valid license to do so by way of voicemail and by way of signage on an exterior door at her office in Knoxville. According to the report, in March of 2008, Ms. Wright's CPA license and firm permit were revoked for failing to make payments as specified in a consent order, which was entered into in August of 2007. Several years later, back in last year, 2012, the alleged violations of holding out without a valid license or firm permit that were just described were looked into by investigators, and a consent order was sent to the respondent, which was not accepted at the time. And so this matter was transferred to litigation to Mr. Joseph, and the matter was filed with the Administrative Procedures Division. Subsequent to that, Mr. Joseph began speaking with Ms. Wright's counsel and was able to negotiate a proposed agreed order. The proposed agreed order would cover the violations that were set forth in the notice of hearing and charges and make a formal hearing unnecessary. The total civil penalty proposed would be $4,000, and this $4,000 civil penalty would cover the outstanding balance of the 2007 consent order, which was not paid previously, would pay $200 to reimburse the state for investigation and hearing costs to file the NOHC, And then for the current violations, a $2,467.68 additional civil penalty for the holding out violations. It appears that Ms. Wright will at some point intend to reapply for license reinstatement, and that's not today or tomorrow. And based on the totality of the circumstances, both Mr. Joseph and myself would recommend that the board accept this proposed agreed order, especially given the difficulties of proceeding in collection matters to try to collect civil penalties from a respondent who doesn't have an active CPA license or firm permit against which to proceed as as the stick to enforce orders. So with that, and according to Mr. Joseph, the $4,000 proposed civil penalty has been received and pending board approval. All it's got to do is be taken to the cashier's office and posted, and we'll be able to close this out. So we both recommend acceptance, and Mr. Joseph's available if the board has any questions.
Sorry, members of the board, I didn't know what time you all anticipated.
That's okay.
About this matter.
I understand that she's already paid the $4,000.
Yes, yes, Your Honor. She's already paid the $4,000 a few days ago. That money is being held. We're holding that under lock and key until board approval. We didn't want to cash it prematurely, and if in fact the proposed settlement was not approved, have to refund the money. But the check was drawn on the attorney's trust account. I have no problem with the check being good, and it's already been received earlier this week.
Move that we accept the recommendation as stated.
Second.
Motion, have a second. Any discussion? Mr. Whitaker, do y'all need a roll call vote or just a simple yea or nay? Okay.
Simple motion and collective vote will be fine.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, we accept the order. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you. Start with the rulemaking hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, just as a preliminary matter, since there are a couple new board members with us, just to give an idea of the structure, do have a script from which we will be proceeding. There are some things that have to be read into the record. Among those things are the text or a very concise summary of the rules, and then also an economic impact statement, and then just a brief statement about the impact on local governments. The rules themselves will require a roll call vote to approve, and the statements, economic impact and local government statements, will simply be read into the record, and you can do a motion and collective vote at that time. So with that, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Whitaker. I serve as Assistant General Counsel for the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy in the Department of Commerce and Insurance Regulatory Boards Division. With the agency representatives, that'd be the Executive Director and board members who are present today, introduce themselves for the record.
My name is Mark Crocker, and I'm the Executive Director of the Board of Accountancy.
My name is Gabe Roberts. I'm a member of the Board of Accountancy.
Stephen Eldridge. I'm a member of the Board of Accountancy.
Corey Brewer, State Board of Accountancy.
I'm Casey Stewart, a member of the State Board of Accountancy.
Wade Watkins, member of the State Board of Accountancy.
Don Royston, member, State Board of Accountancy.
Jennifer Brundage, member of the State Board of Accountancy.
Henry Haas, member of the State Board of Accountancy.
Vic Alexander, member of State Board of Accountancy.
Bill Blockers, member of State Board of Accountancy.
Thank you. Today is Friday, July the 19th, 2013. This rulemaking hearing is taking place pursuant to TCA Section 4-5-204 in Conference Room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower, 500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee 37243. The purpose of this hearing is to solicit comments on proposed rules that the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy has made public in order to clarify certain language within the rules, to amend certain educational and continuing professional education requirements for licensees, to reduce the biennial licensing fee for CPAs, to set forth the accounting activities that a CPA whose license is in inactive status may perform, and to make other rule changes that will be more clearly specified at this hearing. A rule is defined as an agency statement of general applicability that implements or prescribes law or policy, or describes the procedures or practice requirements of the agency. Proposed rules are filed with the Office of the Secretary of State. Notice is given to the public for comment, and a rulemaking hearing, which is what we're doing today, is held. Upon conclusion of the hearing and adoption of the proposed rules, the rules are forwarded to the Attorney General's office to be reviewed for legality. If approved, they are then filed with the Secretary of State, which is responsible for publication, and with the Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly. The rules must stay in the Secretary of State's office for 75 days, at the end of which time that will be the effective date. Any members of the public who wish to speak or comment should sign in at the table at the back of the room. Anyone who has signed in will be permitted to speak. The notice of rulemaking hearing, including the entire text of the proposed rules, was filed on May the 23rd, 2013, and it was listed in the May 2013 edition of the Tennessee Administrative Register. Additionally, the Board approved this rulemaking hearing and the regulatory flexibility analysis relative to these rules, the latter of which is required under TCA 4-5-401 on May the 3rd, 2013. Mr. Crocker, what additional notice was given to affected individuals or groups?
The notice of rulemaking hearing was posted on the Tennessee Secretary of State's website on May the 30th, 2013, and it was posted on the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy's website on May 31st, 2013. Additionally, for licensees who have opted in under TCA Section 4-3-1306D to receive electronic notice via email of changes which may affect their license, the email opt-in notice, which included a link to the hearing of notice and hearing and charges, was posted and sent on May 31st, 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker. And as the agency hears public comment, if any, on the proposed rules, I, as moderator, reserve the right to limit such comments if they become repetitive. I will now read the substance of the proposed rules into the record. First change is to Chapter 0020-01, Rule -04 Sub 1 regarding fees, reduces the biennial licensing fee from the current $120 due every 2 years to $110 due every 2 years. 0020-01-.05 regarding applications, amends paragraph 3 to state that a candidate who fails to appear for the CPA exam shall forfeit all fees charged for both the application and the examination. All applications for initial licensure shall expire 1 year from the date of the application for initial licensure. Rule 0020-01-.06 is amended by adding a new paragraph numbered 11, stating that all CPA exam scores shall expire 10 years after the first passing score is earned. However, upon written request by the applicant, the Board may, in its sole discretion, grant an extension of the score expiration date for good cause shown. Moving to Chapter 0020-04, Rule -.03 regarding grounds for disciplinary action against licensees, is amended to state that the Board has no jurisdiction over fee disputes between a licensee and a client. The board shall not seek to impose discipline against a licensee solely on the basis of a dispute between the licensee and the client regarding payment of fees by the client for professional services rendered by the licensee. Moving now to Chapter 0020-05, Rule -.03, amending basic requirements. The amendments will now state that subsection A, for purposes of disciplinary action, the board shall retain jurisdiction over all certificate holders whose license is in inactive status. Subsection B, certificate holders who are granted inactive status by the board shall be required to place the word inactive adjacent to their CPA or PA designation when using such designation for any lawful purpose, including but not limited to the use of such designation on any business card, letterhead, resume, or biography. Subsection C, a certificate holder who has been granted inactive status may not for compensation perform or offer to perform for the public, including the providing of accounting services from a licensed accounting firm, any of the following services: any accounting or auditing services which involves the issuance of reports on financial statements, including opinions, reviews, compilations, or attest engagements; any consulting engagement which would constitute the attest function, or furnishing advice on tax matters. Subsection D, a certificate holder who has been granted inactive status may perform the services set forth in subsection C above if the services are provided without compensation to the certificate holder, if the services are performed solely for the certificate holder's employer and such employer is not a licensed accounting firm, or if the certificate holder does not use the CPA or PA designation in association with his or her name while providing such lawful services. Subsection E, a certificate holder who is 65 years old or older and possesses a certificate in inactive status shall not be required to pay the biennial license renewal fee required for licensees as set forth in these rules. Subsection F, certificate holders who are granted inactive status must complete 80 hours of CPE in the areas of accounting, accounting ethics, attest, taxation, or management advisory services during the 24-month period preceding the date of their request for reactivation of their license. The CPE hours required to reactivate a license may also be used as credit toward the renewal requirement so long as those hours are completed within the 2-year window prior to the licensee's next December 31st renewal date. And finally, Rule 0020-5-.03 amends paragraph 6, states that an applicant for renewal whose license has expired as set forth in Rule 0020-1-.08 sub 7 shall complete no less than 80 hours of CPE in the areas of accounting, accounting ethics, attest, taxation, or management advisory services during the 6-month period preceding the date of reapplication. The CPE hours required to reinstate an expired license are considered penalty hours and may not be used to offset the CPE hours required for the renewal of a license. That concludes the text of the proposed rules, and at this time I will read the economic impact statement and local government impact statements into the record. The economic impact statement requires that the following factors be considered and with the responses on the record accordingly. Number 1, the type or types of small businesses and identification and estimate of the number of small businesses subject to the proposed rule or rules that would bear the cost of or directly benefit from the proposed changes. In this case, CPA firms, especially smaller firms run by solo practitioners, will benefit from the reduced license fees, and individual CPAs themselves will benefit from clarification of the scope of permissible services to be performed by inactive licensees. Number 2, the projected reporting, record keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance with the proposed rule, including the type of professional skills necessary for preparation of the report or record. The projected administrative record keeping and reporting costs are anticipated to be minimal. Number 3, a statement of probable effect on impacted small businesses and consumers. Be essentially the same response to number one. Small businesses would benefit from a reduction in license fees, and also consumers would benefit from being able to have CPAs with an inactive license perform certain services that are permissible under the right circumstances, for example, nonprofits and things of that nature. Number 5, a comparison of the proposed rule with any federal or state counterparts. It's not applicable in this case. And number 6, an analysis of the effect of the possible exemption of small businesses from all or any part of the requirements contained in the proposed changes. If small businesses were to somehow be exempted, they would not benefit from these changes because their cost of doing business would be higher. And finally, the local government impact statement. These proposed changes are not anticipated to have any impact on local governments. At this time, if there are any comments, those can be done. Anyone who wishes to speak, please step to the podium. Hearing no comments, this time we'll do a motion to approve the economic impact statement, and we'll do that first.
Motion.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then we'll do a motion to approve the local government impact statement as read into the record.
So move.
Any discussion? I have a proper motion. I have a proper second. No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
And finally, we'll need to do a roll call vote to approve the text of the proposed rule changes, and so we'll do that at this time.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, I have a second. We will start, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll start the roll call, starting with Mr. Roberts.
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Bill Bloss is aye.
I'm sorry, Bill. I keep forgetting you're there.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The proposed rule changes are hereby approved by the board and will be sent to the Attorney General's office to be reviewed for legality. That concludes the rulemaking hearing, and I'd like to thank everyone for being here today.
Thank you.
I apologize. We may need to redo that roll call vote so everybody identifies by name who voted, because everyone went around saying aye, but if someone just is listening to this, they may not
If you
be.
would just say your name and just say aye.
Gabe Roberts, aye.
Stephen Eldridge, aye.
Troy Brewer, aye.
Casey Stewart, aye.
Ray Watkins, aye.
Von Royston, aye.
Jennifer Brundage, aye.
Henry Haas, aye.
Alexander, aye.
Bill Bloss is aye.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Unanimous. So.
Motion passes.
I said it was unanimous, so they figured that. They all knew we voted for it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. We will move on with the agenda here. Jennifer, do you have anything to report on the Board Effectiveness and Legislative Support Committee?
Just briefly, the next committee meeting is in August. And since then, I think last time I gave you an update of what the full committee had done, and it's broken down into some subcommittees. And I participated in a teleconference for one of the subcommittees. It was the Legislative Affairs Network Subcommittee. Basically, they're putting together a network of identifying various groups and putting together relationships for having a legislative affairs network. And some of the associations that have been identified and that I guess coalitions are being built would be like the Accountants Coalition, the CPA State Executives Association, the AICPA Federal and State Legislative Teams, things like that. There's also been a bipartisan congressional CPA caucus that was formed by 2 congressmen, and I believe it's NASBA, AICPA, and the TAC will be meeting quarterly with that caucus. So it's really working on these networks of legislators at various levels and creating relationships and communication. All I have to report.
Thank you. Troy, I know we've gone over some stuff already, but you have anything to report on the Uniform Accountancy Act Committee?
The UAA committee, we did have a conference call in June, and I have a copy of the current definition of a test, and then I have the revised statement. So and then I have a few exclusions and things below that. I'm going to hand this out so you actually be able to see it, and it's out for exposure. So if you have a question. Copy. I do. As you see this, there are some exclusions to the current definitions, which compilations are an exclusion from both the current and revised statements. Of course, I think in our state, our rules include those. So that may be an issue that we may have to possibly have to approach down the road for that. And then below the revised definition, which you can see the change is there was 5 added. The last line is the main change, and then below the revised definition, I kind of in general just kind of wrote what the expanded, more or less they expanded the definition of a test in general is what's happened. In other words, in their view, in our view, the UAA committee, and I think they've been trying to work on this for a long time now, and they've revised it, changed it, went back, and of course now, like I say, it's out for exposure. I think the landscape had changed to where there were more reports being issued beyond standard audits, reviews, historical data. So there were other types of reports that were becoming more prominent. So they wanted to expand how it was defined, and by having other reports out there were other professional folks that were, I don't know if they were using CPA language in statements to approve data. And so it got confusing that they thought when you had an architect or an engineer or somebody that was going to write a statement to back some data, they would actually have words that were in CPA statements in there. So that they thought that was confusing. So when they expanded it, that was one thing they wanted to cover, was that part. Mobility for individuals and firms, when they expanded it, they wanted to make sure, and that's something that they haven't put out for exposure yet as far as UAA. That's probably what will be next. But in our state, we have individual mobility and firm mobility, and I think at the last group that I was with, we're one of a few, Mark, am I right, where there's only, in our region, it's maybe just two or three states that actually have individual and firm mobility.
Firm mobility, yes.
Yeah.
Alabama has firm mobility.
Right. And so when they expanded it, they're trying to leave it open so when states do, or when they want to change, they're able to do that by expanding the definition of that. So that in general is why they're trying to upgrade how that's defined. Mobility will be next. We were going to have a conference call UAA about that on July the 10th. It was postponed to July the 15th, and that one was postponed till either July the 30th or August the 7th, and I'm not sure which date that'll be. But when we have that conference call, we'll move to mobility from there. So that's my AA report.
Moving into the board committee reports, Law and Rules Committee, back to you, Troy.
On rules, let me move back here. We did meet yesterday with, let me get back to my, we had two items on the list. Let me get to my, one issue was the penalty, or I think we discussed how the state-specific hours for CPEs, I think they've been in place now since probably 2007. So at this point, it should be well known that you have to do that. It's on the website. It's been out there a good while. So we were trying to get a way and make it more clear that there is a penalty involved with not doing that. I think we were trying to fit that, and if any help here, if I remember correctly, we're trying to add that as part of the, I think it was section 0020-05-031, where we were going to add that some type of, and I think Mark and Chris may help with some words to add that as part of the 8-hour CPE penalty if you do not complete that, plus the other 80-hour, 20-hour requirements. Because I think at this point, the way it has been going is that if you have a certain amount of time to complete your 2 hours of state-specific, if you were audited and it was not there, if you completed the 2 hours at that point, the procedure was over. I mean, you comply. So with this rule being out for 6 years now, we were trying to clarify and make sure that it fits into that rule with the 80 hours, and if it's not completed, that you may have a penalty of 8 hours CPE or some other issues. And I think we also added a statement just to clarify it in two sections. I think we also added it to section 0020-05-08 as part of, we're going to add some more words to clarify that also as part of when it explains you need, how many hours you have to have in certain areas, and you can only have 20 hours. You have to have 20 hours, per year in the, at least, I mean, in the cycle. It's as far as hours. We tried to add the words to that. That was our first issue with the law that we talked about yesterday. The other was a penalty for not paying the privilege tax, and I think that was a topic that came up in May. And at this point, I think talked to the Department of Revenue a couple of times, and this really probably doesn't affect us, but it had been to where you had to be 2 years delinquent on the Tennessee Department of Revenue's list before we would get that information. And by the time we could take care of it and try to start an investigation, it'd be 2.5 years old. So we were trying to look at, and then we may have man hours and paperwork and that kind of thing. So we're trying to avoid that issue altogether. And I think if we had decided I think we'd looked at a rule, I like to say, I think it was Rule 62-1-105, where with the conduct statement in there, that we may be able to apply our own rule to take care of that as accountancy board, if I'm trying to speak this correctly. And of course, at this point, the way it's going, the privilege tax is out on June the 1st. To do it a certain date, and like I say, in an ideal world, probably the last day of January, we have a list. We have a list of who's not paid, and then notes go out beyond that. So maybe instead of having a 2.5-year-old delinquent payment, it may be just a year old. And then if we can take care of things ourselves and we're able to write the rule and enforce it, that may be the statement we need to make and add. And I think Chris and Mark are going to help with the words of how to add that. That is the two items that we spoke about. Is any comments, Mark, Chris? Is that
No, I think you covered it.
okay? Thanks.
I'm not sure I understood what you were saying about the delinquency of the privilege tax. Are you saying that in the past the board had not been notified until the person was 2 years late?
Correct.
And now what's going to happen?
Actually, the law states that after 1 year, they receive a letter from the Commissioner of Revenue stating that they are delinquent and should pay the tax. After 2 years, they are reported to the board.
That's referred by the commissioner over to this office?
Yes, sir. So I'm not sure we can do anything about that particular length of time. We are not going to be notified until they are 2 years delinquent.
What we're trying to do is be able to take care of the civil penalty among the accountancy board instead of having the Department of Revenue. Am I saying this correctly?
What we're seeking is a stronger ability to discipline these people for not paying the professional privilege tax. Right now, we're calling it a discreditable act, and we're kind of stretching to make that fit. If there's a specific rule that says failure to pay professional privilege tax subjects you to discipline, that would make it easier for us to prosecute should it come to that.
So you're looking at drafting some kind of wordage to amend the rules to do that?
Yes, Henry.
Okay.
Specifically, Rule 0020-4-.03. We talked about adding a subsection 9 under Section C, just stating failure to pay professional privilege tax subjects you to discipline.
Does it put in there 1 year, 2 years, or?
No, that's specified in a different section of the code.
If I may, Mr. Haas, the issue here is making sure that the board has clear authority in its law and rules to do this. So the thinking was that failure to timely pay professional privilege tax as required by law, and just leaving it at that gives the board the broadest possible scope of authority. Now, as Mark mentioned, as a practical matter, the reporting that we get from revenue is still going to be the same.
2 years.
That's correct. Right. So because revenue's own statute, which is not our statute, just says, okay, you get essentially a letter of warning from the Commissioner of Revenue. That's what they do, and that's all they do. The reporting mechanism for revenue to report 2 years or more of delinquent privilege tax liability to professional licensing boards, just by the own text of the statute, it doesn't kick in until that 2 year mark.
Henry, I may have said we're trying to cut that down. That's probably what confused us. I was trying to think back. I probably said we're trying to cut that down towards a year, but with the way the Department of Revenue procedures goes, we won't be able to do that. I think that's probably where I may have confused you on that. I think I did say, and that was my fault.
If an individual doesn't pay their privilege tax and get a notice from the Department of Revenue, and then they turn around and pay it, then does that stop all delinquency issues with the Department of Revenue? That just kind of ends the discussion at that point, doesn't it? For us, it does.
For the board, for the most part, yes. I mean, provided that happens before it's reported to us, and as was mentioned yesterday, before the board gets investigation man-hours, paperwork, and other time invested in the situation, then for our purposes, yes, it would. And again, the way the proposed rule would be drafted would be, again, to give the board maximum flexibility. So if it did get to us and the board and the staff had done some work, then the board would have the authority to pursue civil penalty or other disciplinary action to be reimbursed for that time. But if it came to us but they got paid up before anything happened, before a complaint got opened, then board staff would have the discretion not to open the complaint and get everything started.
Completed.
Okay, thank you, Troy. Jennifer, the licensing committee?
We had a lengthy committee meeting yesterday. We had 7 action items on the agenda. I'm going to give just a brief overview, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to provide more information and more flavor of the discussion. We did have thorough discussions on each of the items, and everybody was very prepared to do so. We received 3 requests for approval to present Tennessee state-specific ethics. One from CCH, one from Dennis Dicus, and one from Accounting Tools. After reviewing those courses and comparing them to the, we have a content-specific outline that the committee had put together in the past and that Dr. Riggs has used over the years to review these proposed ethics courses. The committee looked at that outline and compared it to what was presented. The committee recommended approval of CCH and Dennis Dicus's presentations, and we recommend providing Accounting Tools with a copy of the content-specific outline and requesting that they strengthen the Tennessee-specific ethics portion. What they presented was basically just a regurgitation or reprinting of our rules, and then they had about 5 pages of questions and answers. And so we felt that we hadn't seen that before, and we felt like it needed to be beefed up where, there was actually some paragraphs in colloquial language explaining situations and proposing, maybe some thought processes like what we typically see in some of these self-study courses. This actually was a self-study course. So the recommendation was to go back to them and ask them to strengthen that. The 4th item that we considered was CFA, Society of East Tennessee, requested exemption from the requirement to register with NASBA as a CPE sponsor pursuant, the exemption is pursuant to Rule 0020-5-.053A. We considered their request, we considered that rule, and there's a list that's maintained of other organizations that have received exemption in the past, and the CFA Society of Chattanooga was given approval in the past. So upon all the consideration, the committee recommends approval of that exemption request. Licensee Jan Silvas request that, I'm moving on to the next item. Licensee Jan Silvas has requested CPE credit for time spent as a board member in GASB board meetings. She presented a letter explaining what happens on these GASB board meetings where they're actually promulgating state and local government accounting standards. They meet about 9 times a year, but spend about 166.5 hours deliberating in face-to-face board meetings, and she's requesting that those hours spent in the board meetings be given CPE credit. She's not actually asking for the time she spends actually preparing for those meetings. We, as the committee, spent time considering this and looking at the rules, and came to the recommendation that based on the specific circumstances of this and knowing what happens at the GASB board meetings and the technical nature, and pursuant to Rule 0020-05-.0410, that we recommend approval of the request, that she would provide the executive director with a summary of the board hours that she's seeking approval of, and that for the technical board meeting hours that she be given credit for, not actually the board hours that are just kind of administrative functions. The next item was licensee James Walden requested CPE credit for courses completed for the Graduate School of Banking program. After much discussion and consideration, the committee recommends deferring this item and asking the licensee to provide the course detail for the 47 hours that he is asking to receive CPE credit for. We felt like we needed a better understanding of those courses. We were just provided a general overview from the school without much detail as to what those courses entailed. And the last item, Alan Cantrell of NASBA has requested an extension of time for candidate Jennifer Sabilis, if I'm pronouncing that right, to complete the education requirements. Just in summary, NASBA incorrectly calculated her total accounting hours. She got caught up in the middle of the rule change where we went from the 24 accounting hours to 30 hours, and NASBA made a mistake and calculated those hours incorrectly. And we're talking about the 150-hour education requirement for her to sit for the CPA exam. And so they're asking, and she's asking, for a 6-month extension for her to obtain the 150-hour pursuant to TCA 62-1-106C, which allows the board to do so for good cause shown. And after consideration, the committee recommends granting that extension. That concludes the report from the committee. I think we need just one vote to accept the recommendation.
Do we need? I need to abstain from that one area. So if we could break that one out.
Yeah, I apologize. I meant to say on the Dennis Dicus request for the Tennessee State Ethics, Mr. Eldridge did abstain from discussions and voting on that because of Mr. Dicus's consulting relationship with his firm. So if we could take
Everything
all the
but
items.
the Dennis Dicus one first. So do I have a motion to
So moved.
accept? Okay, a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. We will have a separate vote here on the Dennis Dicus course. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, for just a moment, going back briefly to the Law and Rules Committee, if it's the board's will that Mark and I try and come up with some language before the next meeting, we could use a vote for that just to cover it. And in case anybody asks, well, did the board approve this? Yes. So, but if we could just go ahead and have a vote to accept the Law and Rules Committee's recommendations and have Mark and I work on some language for the next meeting.
So moved. You got a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Okay, having a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay. We'll move into executive committee. The only thing we really did was go over the financial statements, and I think the biggest thing there was that we were going to have maybe we're projecting $100,000 surplus at this point or thereabouts, but we're not sure about. Oh, did it change? I'm sorry.
Changed.
Okay. How much did you end up projecting?
It came down to about $47,000.
Oh, big difference. Okay. That's because of that one item. Yeah.
One line,
Okay.
salaries.
Forgot about that. Okay. So that was what we're projecting to have as surplus, but we don't know the chargebacks yet from the department, right?
Correct. We're projecting $240,000 in cost backs.
Okay.
And that is a pure guess.
Pure guess. Okay. So that number could change based on that. The other thing we discussed was allowing the administrative law judge to hear CPE and professional privilege tax cases. It's strictly a formality. We've done this in years past. I think Mark even said at one point the only reason we do this is because a judge had asked that the board actually be in or approve their hearing these types of cases. And do you need us to actually do a motion today for that?
Yes, if you would, and vote on it.
So do I have this is strictly to permit the administrative law judge to hear CPE and professional privilege tax cases. So do I have a motion to allow that?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second.
Mr. Chairman, with
Yes.
the caveat that revocation.
I'm sorry. You're exactly right. The only cases that they will not be, what's the term?
Sitting alone without the board.
Right. The board would have to hear cases in which there is the threat of revocation of license. So that's the one caveat to them hearing this. So if that's not an issue, the judge can hear these and they can settle these cases out. So can somebody revise the motion to exclude the revocations?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. And that is all I have for Executive Committee. Don, probable cause.
Probable Cause Committee met yesterday. In your packets, we have a listing of the status. Mr. Mills, would you like to give us the status report first of your cases?
Sure, thank you. You'll have the status of the complaints as of today and by quarter for the past 12 months, the past 4 meetings, I should say. As you can see, our total number of cases that are open has dropped to 48. We have 5 in investigation and 17 in legal. The status of litigation monitoring and the formal charges and hearings set basically have stayed about the same. So our biggest change has been the fact that we've been closing.
Oh, Mr. Mills and I thank you. We obviously have 2 investigators now, so we're able to cover some more cases and cover them more promptly, and also having continuity with our legal staff and not changing every other year has been a tremendous help in communications and not letting things, drop by the wayside. I would remind, and we've had discussions about this before, that and it came up in yesterday even when Doug Warren presented ethics to our convention, that we're the eyes and ears of policing people practicing without a license. Yellow Page is a fair place to look, but those are not always accurate. Websites, looking for designations. If you're looking at one, each of us look at them, run into them all the time. They do accept referrals from board members or friends of the condition, so I'd encourage you to keep your eyes open if you see something that needs to be corrected. It's all about protecting the public, and we're not trying to take anybody's license, as we all know. We're trying to make sure everybody that's claiming they're actually under our umbrella or that they have the same designations that we do are playing by the same set of rules and the same protections to the public. So thank you for that report. You have in your report today, if my thing will quit turning off here on me. My paper usually doesn't turn off, but this little varmint seems to be doing so. You have a 7-page report. We have 18 actions that we'll ask you to look at. If you will review those or some of them, as you go through them, if you will note the first 5 cases that we have, and I'd like to handle those separately and vote on them, are requiring discipline or requesting discipline, and the numbers 6 through 12 are letters of warning recommended, and 13 through 18 are recommending dismissal of the open case. Obviously, this is where we can change recommendations. We're not bound by them, but if you take a minute and review what has been presented to you there, then we'll start through them in just a moment. And Mr. Whitaker thanked him yesterday, but I'll thank him today again for getting the committee out a heads-up list anyway of what he could get us, so that we could read the ones with meat on the bone and try to think about them ahead of time. So.
Mr. Ralston, if I may, just while the board is beginning its review, the items that are listed for dismissal, numbers 13, 14, and 15. The recommendations on those items will be for dismissal of the complaint without prejudice, and a requirement that if the licensee shows back up at some point and wants to reinstate, then they will have to get board approval to do so. These are folks that, despite the best, most diligent efforts of board staff and our investigators, we've not been able to track down. So not only have we not been able to find them, which on the one hand is a good thing because they don't seem to be practicing anywhere, but if we can't serve them with a complaint and or process for a potential formal hearing, then our hands are tied for the time being. But that will give us the flexibility if need be. These folks show back up and decide they'd like to get their license back and practice again, for the board to exercise whatever oversight you guys believe necessary in order to get them back in the fold or not. And then also item number 17, Mr. Eldridge will be recusing himself from the consideration and voting on that item. And with that, and the board's finished its review, we'll be happy to take any questions.
Right through.
I believe everybody's had an opportunity to read, review the cases. As noted in the summary here, the full committee authorized voted to recommend authorization to the board to approve all of these with the exception of one case. That would have been number 17 yesterday. We did not have a quorum present at that point when Mr. Eldridge had to recuse himself. This authorizes 4 civil penalties, this total case, in amount of $9,000, issues 6 letters of warning, 1 letter of instruction, offers consent orders for suspension, surrender, or revocation. We have 1 of those and 6 to dismiss. I'd like to take the first 5 that have discipline and proposed civil penalties in most, and ask if we go down number 1. Is there any question? Vote on the first 5 together. 2 questions or comments? Number 3. Number 4. And number 5.
I have questions about number 5.
Yes, sir.
Number 5, it says the complaint alleges that the respondent CPA failed to promptly communicate with the client regarding the subject matter of an engagement, thereby resulting in potential financial penalties from the IRS. Then later on it goes on to say that he worked it out with his client, if I understand it, worked out a settlement with the client, and that he's got a 25-year history of no problem. So I'm trying to understand, is our reason for discipline that he did something intentional, or there's not enough here for me to really understand what happened, I guess.
That's your case, sir? Okay. Mr. Butler, sir?
He admitted that he didn't communicate with the client.
Intentionally or?
Intentionally.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
I mean,
so he intentionally chose not to communicate. It's not that he made a mistake.
Right.
Okay.
And I mean, he was sorry he did that, but he admitted that he had done that.
That's the clarification I needed, was whether it was intentional or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'd entertain a motion on the first 5 for acceptance of the recommendations of our Assistant General Counsel, Christopher Whitaker. Sure.
We'll move.
Got a motion, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Still with us, Mr. Blofus?
I'm here.
Okay, sir. Thank you. 6 through 12 are for issuing letters of warning. We can vote on those as a group if we would. Any questions on any of those? Number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Hearing no questions, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll take 13 through 16 and 18, and we'll vote on 17 separately. Any questions on 13? 14? 15? 16? And 18? Hearing no questions, I'd entertain a motion for approval. Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Number 17, Mr. Eldridge is excusing himself from this. Any questions on this particular case? Entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Do you have anything else to add to our legal report?
No, sir, Mr. Royston, not the legal report, but if I could briefly, before we move to the next matter, I'd just like to provide the board a quick update on a pending matter that we have in Chancery Court.
Could I ask a question about these? There were several in here where we talked, where they mentioned they were related to some issues coming out of Texas. Was there a relationship with all those different individual cases?
Mr. Ross, the way it is in Texas, it's kind of a once in, never out regime as far as we can ascertain. There's nothing apparently like an inactive license status or something that would just allow you to voluntarily notify the board and not renew. So once that happens, after a certain amount of time passes, and I don't know what that amount of time is, but eventually the Texas board will get around to doing a sort of cattle call hearing in front of an administrative law judge with however many respondents they have. You know, some cases it's been a couple of hundred at a time, and the allegations are identical. You know, you didn't renew, you didn't pay your fees, and that that is the procedure regardless of whether the CPA in question even wrote them a letter and said, hey, I'm not living in Texas, I don't want to practice here anymore. It doesn't matter to them. And so at the end of those cattle call things, they do one order covering all the respondents saying your license is revoked. And when that happens, at some point subsequent to that, when the disciplinary action starts showing up, then notice starts percolating out to the other state boards of accountancy with whom those respondents are licensed. And so once that happens, if those other boards are anything like ours, we're required to at least do something about the fact that the CPA who is licensed with us had their right to practice before another state or federal agency, this case being Texas State Board of Accountancy, limited or otherwise disciplined. And this board's practice so far has been, you know, provided there are no other disciplinary issues and that they're in good standing here, they'll typically go with a letter of warning, because we found that just as many times as not, it's the exact situation that I described just a minute ago, where, you know, people have moved from Texas, they don't practice there, they haven't been there in 15 or 20 years, and it just doesn't really seem all that equitable to try and hit them up for an additional civil penalty when maybe they couldn't get out in the first place they wanted to.
These are all different people.
These are all different people. The ones that are talking about Texas, these are not the same person. As I was saying, some of the board members here, or maybe everyone, I can't remember, it's been a year ago now, but the Edwin Osborne matter came before this board for a formal hearing in July of 2012. At the conclusion of that hearing, the board voted to revoke Mr. Osborne's CPA license and his firm permit and assess a $4,000 civil penalty for Mr. Osborne not timely renewing his license and continuing to let it stay in that status, and then several instances of alleged unlicensed conduct. As I might have mentioned at a meeting or two past, Mr. Osborne did timely appeal this board's decision to Chancery Court, and when cases for regulatory programs go to Chancery Court, the Attorney General's office is tasked with defending the board's decision. During the course of this defense, the AG's office lawyer, who is handling the case on behalf of the board, and his supervisor came across a statute that is not in Title 62 under the Accountancy Board statute, but it's in Title 4, kind of in a little used, I didn't even know it existed sort of place in the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act that speaks to the timing of when something is received. And this is one of those kind of moonshot lottery odds kind of deals, but if the board might recall, the issue was that under the old rules there were two different late fees assessed, $50 after January 31st, $50 after March 31st. Well, in this case, the March 31st fell on a Saturday, and under this statute that I just mentioned, Mr. Osborne and other folks arguably had until the close of business the next business day, which would have been Monday, April the 2nd, to send in whatever it is they have to send in, whether it's, privilege tax payments or renewal or what have you. And the stamp for the Department of Revenue was stamped April the 2nd. So the thinking at the AG's office went something like this: because they were unable to neatly untangle the part of the board's weight and consideration that went into a possibly erroneous time calculation, it looks like it's going to be requested that this matter be remanded to the board for reconsideration by the Chancery Court, if that's approved. Now, the Chancellor doesn't have to do that, but that's what the AG is requesting. And so this matter has already been briefed. Both parties have filed their briefs. Oral argument is set for July the 30th, and I'll be going up there to kind of sit in the gallery and see how that goes. And once that happens, there's no set time frame for the Chancellor to make a ruling. He could either say, okay, well, I'm going to go with what the AG is recommending and remand it, or he could say, no, I'm going to make my own decision and this is what it is, and there you go. And that's kind of where we are at this time. And without saying just too...
Does that mean we have to hear that whole case again?
No, it does not.
Okay.
We will not be relitigating the entire matter. Essentially, it will be remanded on the very narrow issue of what discipline the board wishes to impose in light of, depending on how the wording is the ruling is worded, probably in light of the erroneous time calculation under that statute. So the board will have to say, okay, we either want to still go with what we did, or we're going to say, okay, given that this is not part of the equation anymore, this is what we want to do, and go from there. So that's where we are. Maybe a little confusing, but I'm happy to take any questions or clarify if anybody has any.
Okay, old business. Mark, do we have anything on the peer review oversight committee?
Just a couple of very brief comments, Mr. Chairman. Jim Mickey has agreed to serve on the committee as the former PROC member. One of the requirements is that this committee be composed of a board member, the executive director, and a former PROC member. I contacted Jim. He's been agreed to serve on this committee with Vic Alexander in Bill Office and myself. We've received resumes from an applicant in East Tennessee and one from Middle Tennessee. Nobody from West Tennessee yet. I have some feelers out, but nothing has come into the pipeline yet. So we've got 2 possible members. We're looking for a third. And hopefully by the next board meeting we'll have this in place.
All right. With that, we've got the new business. in the election of the officers for the coming year. We had originally delayed this vote from the last meeting just to allow whatever appointments could be done to be done, but I think we're waiting to hear on 2 appointments. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. So I don't think that would be detrimental to go ahead and hold the elections today. But I guess, Mark, is the process to ask for nominations?
Yes, sir. If you would ask for nominations from the floor.
Okay. I'll entertain any nominations now. The officers' positions will be vice chair, secretary, and chairman. Chairman, vice chair, and secretary, we need to.
Can you repeat?
Oh, yes.
Chair
That is,
one time,
I think so.
Nominate Trey Watkins for chairman.
Any other nominations? Have a motion to close nominations.
Wait a minute, we don't have
2
them.
more officers.
Well, you want to just do them as a, somebody can throw
Do
them
it
out as
as
a
a
block
slate.
if they'd like.
Who's
I'd
secretary?
like to ask Mr. Stewart if he would be willing to serve as vice chair for another year. I'd like to nominate Mr. Stewart for vice chair.
I'll second that.
And we have secretary, which is currently Mr. Blofus.
Officer, are you willing to serve for secretary for another term?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Blofus for
Second.
secretary.
Are there any other nominations? Do I have a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? None? Okay. Nominations are closed. So I guess we now need to vote on the actual officers. Okay. We have nominations for Bill Blofus as secretary, Casey Stewart as vice chair, and Trey Watkins as chairman. Do I have a motion to approve the slate of officers?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none. The officers are elected. And with that, I think we are done.
I know, it's always our, nobody ever happy.